Jared McCann hits a milestone, but unfortunately, it wasn't enough to give the Seattle Kraken a win. Zaiem Beg and Erica L. Ayala, we are going to cover that and more on today's episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Erica L. Ayala here with Zaiem Beg, and we are going to recap the Seattle Kraken game against the Colorado Avalanche. Again, talk about Jared McCann and his milestone, and a few other things that we saw from this game, especially Zaiem, with you being there. But let's just start with the good news, right? Jared McCann, the first player to ever sign a contract extension for the Seattle Kraken, has been one of our leading scorers, the leading scorer for the Seattle Kraken. And, you know, he hit a pretty significant milestone, 100 goals for the organization, or with the organization, the Seattle Kraken.
And he's been the team's the most consistent scorer. And I really loved the goal itself. It was really emblematic of what I think the Kraken should be doing in order to be successful. He gets behind the defense, gets him parked net front, and then he does make a beautiful backhand to finish, but it was his positioning. It was fighting to get net front into the high danger area. And then that's the goal, that's the goal 100. And I just, the work ethic this year has been so good, even in the losses. And this was a work ethic goal. And this was somebody trying to do something to manufacture a score. And Jared McCann did it. He doesn't wear an A, he doesn't wear a C, but he has been in a lot of ways a leader for the team, and he leads on the ice. And it was kind of perfect. It would have been perfect if it was a game winner. So maybe not perfect.
Well, it did tie up the game. So the Colorado Avalanche got one on the board late in the first period, and then McCann scores about halfway through the second, unassisted. And you know, I like what you said about the work ethic. I think that Jared McCann is the kind of player where at times, depending on this Kraken roster, he was looked at as more of a finesse player, just comparative to some of the other kind of grinded out players that we've had on the roster. And I talked about this a little bit earlier this week on the podcast, but Dan Bylsma is setting an expectation that this is going to be a hardworking team. And we've talked about Zaiem, how he wants the team to play fast. We've talked about why that's important, how that can impact the game. But we also broke down, right, why I have said that I think that was the most strenuous, the most grueling training camp and preseason that we've ever seen. And there's a reason that you do that. And it just always has boggled my mind that the Kraken haven't been able to come out the gate swinging. Now, that doesn't always mean, it doesn't guarantee you're going to win. I mean, you know this, Zaiem. I'm in New York right now, and people are controversially trying to say if a WNBA title was quote unquote stolen or not, because the team that won ugly. Here's the thing. A win is a win.
How many champions just in any sport do you look back 10, 15 years from now and go, yeah, but that was an ugly win? No, nobody cares. Nobody remembers. All the people care about is the result.
Right. And I get the sense that that's, you don't know, the Kraken haven't played for a championship yet. We don't know what that is going to look like for them. But what you have to instill now, and what I think Dan is doing a lot better than what we've seen in the years past, is he's getting this team comfortable with being uncomfortable in specific areas in the game. And when you can do that, when you kind of shake off that like feeling of you're not doing what you want to do. You're kind of being pushed to play a different way. And there's a balancing act because I would argue at times now retroactive, we can probably say Dave Haxtell had people playing in ways that they weren't comfortable, but it didn't yield the results that he or the team or maybe even the individual player was looking for. But with Dan, I think it's a little bit of a challenge that he has put out to this team to think a little bit more about getting a little more gritty, having a little more grit, a little more sandpaper. And that if we can find ways to win ugly, if you can find those ways to win ugly, always be in games, make things difficult for your opponent, then you can open up your game for the more finesse stuff. So I think Jared McCann, he's such an interesting player because he has 100 goals, right, Zaiem? He has been the leading scorer for the Seattle Kraken. And like you said, he is a leader here. So he's wearing a lot of different hats for this Kraken team and trying to help them navigate what I don't think is it like a complete overhaul, but it is a little bit of a culture change right now.
Yeah. And, you talk about starting fast. And last night, I think, was a really good example of that. It didn't go Seattle's way, but they came out flying. They hit the post in the first 15 seconds. They hit 2 posts early on. They were out shooting Colorado 7-0 in the first 5 minutes. They just couldn't get anything through. And then, unfortunately, with 1 minute and 18 seconds left in the period, they give up a goal to a player who is not a goal scorer, Yoel Kiviranta. And I think he had something like 3 goals last year in 30 games or something. He's not a goal scorer, yeah. Which is, he also scored another goal last night, which is when you're losing to Joel Kiviranta goals, that's just kind of a weird thing happening. But
yeah.
I love the way that the Kraken would come out, and they came out flying, and they were really trying to take it to Colorado. And if one of those pucks goes in instead of hitting the post, the game maybe plays a little differently. It feels a little different.
Yeah, for sure. To your point, Seattle outshot Colorado 12-5 in the first period. That then got inverted, not exactly, but 17 shots on goal for the Avalanche in the second stanza versus only 5 for the Seattle Kraken. Again, one of those 5 though being the McCann goal. But they give up 2 goals in that frame. And that's the give and take though, right? Of asking a team to play a little bit different than they're used to. There are going to be moments where you're hitting posts, you're out shooting your opponent, but they're leading on the scoreboard. And that also takes a little bit of a mental toughness that I don't know that we've always seen with consistency for the Seattle Kraken. But I do think that, we're seeing a little bit of consistency in attitude and mentality in this team, even though the results, and it's still early in the season, so it's not overwhelmingly skewed wins, losses right now, obviously. But I do think that there's a bounce back to this team and a willingness to just take what you need from the win or the loss, the last game, but also focus on the game that you're about to play.
Yeah, and I think last night's a really good example of that as well. So in the second period, as you mentioned, they kind of got caved in a little bit. The Colorado had a much better period than Seattle in the second, and they gave up 2 goals. One was a power play goal. Neither goal was really like a bad goal to give up. Just kind of things happened. But then last year, and when under Dave Haxtell, often if they would come out strong and then maybe get deflated by a late period goal, and then they come out the second and they don't play well, you kind of saw a little bit of a mailing it in the third, like, we're not coming back down 2 goals, which the Kraken did not do at any point last season. They did not come back from a 2-goal deficit. Last night, the Kraken are down 2 goals, and they were fighting, and they were just fighting and fighting and fighting, and they scored a goal with 4.1 seconds left to pull within 1. And even when it was clear, okay, we scored this goal, you're not going to win the game or even force overtime and get a point, but they were playing like the score was tied. There was some desperation and like a willingness to show that, okay, we can do this, and we can establish that we're a team that, even if we're down and even if the game appears to be over, we are going to keep having that Terminator energy, that relentlessness, and that tenacity. And because and say, hey, you may play the Seattle Kraken and you may beat us, but we're going to make it hard on you. It is not going to be easy. And look, every team is going to lose 20 games. Every team is going to win 20 games. But those 20 games that people win against the Kraken, those should be hard games.
Yes. I love that you said that, because I know we talked about it on the podcast. I can't imagine it would have been anyone other than Dan that said this, but effectively he said early on to us as media that one of the things that he wants to be the identity of this team is that when you play the Kraken, like, you're going to feel it. You're going to know that you played us, right? And you mentioned something earlier, and I pulled up Natural Stat Trick. I want to bring this up here because, I love showing the game flow. Zaiem, in a loss, like, look at this game flow chart in a loss. That is the definition of like putting your foot on the gas pedal. Now, again, to your point, it didn't yield goals. So that is something eventually that's going to have to get figured out. But it's early in the game, or early in the season, excuse me. But in this game, the momentum, puck possession, even 50-50 pucks was literally 50-50, which made me chuckle because I love stuff like that. But puck possession, 50-50 battles, those are the things where in the past, the Seattle Kraken maybe don't like their effort in those areas. But I don't see that as an issue this year. That's not why they're losing a game 3-2 to Colorado, right? It's not a hustle or an effort issue. Not at all. In the past, it has been. Like, if we want to keep it a buck, there have been times, you just said it, I've said it, how many ways can you say sometimes we kind of mailed it in, which is so funny because as you were talking, Zaiem, I was reminded that Dave Haxtell never believed in momentum carrying over. But also it just felt like the trend of the Kraken at times was that, especially maybe not the most positive momentum did sometimes carry over from game to game. But anyway, I mean, tough loss, lessons to be learned. And there's another game this week, and you and I are going to stick around and talk about that one, get everyone ready for the next game against the Winnipeg Jets. But, I want to break this down a little bit more and think about the lines and the lineup, especially knowing that, Vince Dunn is going to be out, LTIR. So how, if at all, and do we even know how his absence is impacting the Seattle Kraken at this juncture? We'll talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. You know that I'm always on the road now, and I love checking out Game Time to see what kind of deals I can get on tickets to some of my favorite events. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I also really love the all-in pricing. Now, this is a feature that you can get on the app. You have to toggle for it, but this will allow you to see the total upfront cost for your event, no surprise fees at checkout. So we want you to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's game time. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. You can earn up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Now, this is what's amazing about Prize Picks. It is the best place to get real money sports action. Over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win, as I mentioned, up to 100 times your cash. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And imagine one of your picks gets injured. That is where the insurance policy comes in. Your lineup stays in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Pick keeps your lineup live. So there's so many reasons, and I could go on why you should use Prize Picks. Those were just a few. But here's what you have to do. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first lineup. Again, download the app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. And so, Zaiem, I have here slow start against Colorado. And I think both of us have kind of said it was and it wasn't. You know, I think the offensive chances there, but slow to find the back of the net. And that's a little bit different. And I don't know, do you get a sense of if one is more frustrating than the other for this team?
If a team is generating chances and they're not going in the net, I would way rather see that than a team that is just struggling to create chances, because one is often just product of luck and puck luck, you know?
Yeah.
And if you're doing the right things, if you're putting yourself in good positions, good things are going to happen. Even if in a 1 game or 2 game or even a 5 game sample, sometimes good things don't happen on the scoreboard. If you're just constantly putting pucks on net, getting pressure, creating high quality chances, and not making, you know, huge mistakes, you're going to come out ahead. That's why they play 82 games. And if the Kraken play every game the way they played last night, I think they're a playoff team. The Avalanche are a really, really good team, despite their 0-4 start. You know, one of the goals was Kiviranta, but it was essentially set up by Cale Makar, a superstar. The power play goal by Nathan MacKinnon was just Nathan MacKinnon being Lalo Salamanca, just dangerous and terrifying and always a threat to do something evil. You know, and that just happens. Colorado has superstars and Seattle doesn't, and that's fine. You can obviously win without that, but sometimes talent's just going to win. Yeah. I was not discouraged by the loss last night, and that has not always been true because they played Colorado before, and especially some of those regular season games, like that was ugly. It's like, ooh, this team is not. I mean, they're not on the same level.
Yeah, for sure, and I agree with you. I think, you know, kind of like I alluded, I tossed in my WNBA reference early in the pod, but you know, a loss, just like a win is a win, to some extent, a loss is a loss. And, you know, players at the pro level are hesitant to embrace quote unquote moral victories. But again, this is where I want to bring up momentum, because I'm okay with saying, yeah, we're not accepting any moral victories. I also think that you can lean into momentum, and some of the measure of success, even in a loss, can come from just differentiating between just losing and not learning any lessons, and being able to say, okay, we lost this game, but in the metrics and in the things that matter to us, we got better than our last outing. And I think that is, I don't know that I have, it's more anecdotal at this point, Zaiem, but I do think there are things, and the vibe feels like this is a Kraken team that's able to learn from either a loss, an outright loss, or a performance that they feel slipped from them in specific moments.
I agree. And you're also seeing things change and evolve throughout the season. So the penalty kill has struggled a little bit, and the penalty kill has been very passive. Last night, the PK was much more aggressive. They're getting people on pucks. Yeah, they're forcing the power play unit to make decisions. The power play goal, they did give one up, but their positioning wasn't bad. It was just Nathan McKinnon beating a good penalty kill structure. I have no problem with that PK structure at all. And that's not something that we saw in the previous games. And in the previous games, the PK wasn't very good and it was too passive. Now they're being more aggressive. And, we'll see. It's going to take, some number of games. You can't look at just, 3 power plays, which, by the way, I just want to add that they were calling the game tight last night, but the first 3 power plays were all awarded to Colorado. And then there was some of the stuff they were letting go on the other side. Seattle got a power play penalty with exactly 2 minutes left in the game, down 3-1. So just the officiating variance also did not break Seattle's way. And I think that was a significant contributor. But what you see that they're evolving, they take what works, and then they build on that, and then they look at what doesn't work, and they say, okay, what can we take from that and make it better? And I love this growth mindset.
Yes, growth mindset. I love it. I love it. I love it. And that is something that's going to be important for this team, because we do know there are players like Shane Wright, like Riker Evans, that are, coming up to the NHL, expected to make a big difference. And you mentioned the power play. It was Riker Evans actually scores on the power play for the Seattle Kraken. You love to see it. And he
scored with 4.1 seconds left, and where it's 41. So
look at that. Look at that. I mean, come on. We were joking about Mercury retrograde both last week and a little bit before we recorded. So I don't know. We got to check the stars for Riker there. But that's important. And that's where having a coaching staff like the coaching staff that Dan Bylsma put together, it gives me confidence and faith that, to your point, this can be a team that makes a strong push to whether, it's 90 points, playoff team. I mean, those are probably the same, or you would hope they are. My goodness gracious. Who knows what's going to happen in the league. And that, before we move on to Vince Dunn, I remember offline last week, I was like, there was a question I wanted to ask you and I couldn't remember what it was. I remembered now, Zaiem. I had made a prediction and I said I wanted to see in this homestand that Seattle Kraken get 7 points. We're going to say halfway. We've got 2 games left. Do you think that's it's still mathematically possible? Do you think without getting too much into the opponents, because we're going to talk about that, but what are your thoughts? What would you like to see the Seattle Kraken take away from this homestand?
Why not? They have to get 3 points in the next 2 games.
Yeah,
I don't see why that's not realistic.
Yeah,
they are doing a lot of things well, and they seem to be getting better from each game to the next overall.
Yep.
They took a pretty good Avalanche team, and they gave them a fight. They beat a very good, at least what we thought was going to be a very good Nashville team, pretty handily. The Kraken are at a point where if they beat any team, I'm not like, whoa, what an upset. That's crazy. It's just like, the Kraken, I don't know if they're a good team yet, and I don't know where they'll be at the end of the season. But if they ended up being a very good team, I would not be shocked. I would not be surprised and be like, wow, I really didn't see that coming. Last year, at the start of the season, if you said, okay, this team is going to be a very, very good team, there was some doubts even coming off the playoff run. Here, there's just more talent, and the team just plays in a way that's a little bit more modern and a little bit more punishing. You want to punish mistakes. You want, if a team makes a mistake, you don't want it to just like go out of the zone and then the other team gets a line change. You want that puck to go in the back of the net.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. And we know that this is a team, like you said, that I love that can be punishing and really get after the game on both sides of the puck. However, they are going to have to make some adjustments if they want to reach 7 points or more. My bold prediction. So tell us if you're going to take the over or under on that. And they're going to have to do it without Vince Dunn. So we're going to talk about that coming up on Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Don't forget to visit FanDuel.com. Once again, that's FanDuel.com. Are you taking the over or the under on 87.5 wins for the Seattle Kraken this season? Will the win or loss against the Jets maybe change your mind about that projection? Either way, you can do all you need to over at FanDuel.com. As always, a reminder to gamble responsibly. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala joined by Zaiem Beg, and we're recapping the game against Colorado. Close game. We talked about that. We really broke that down. But what we also found out, and I've talked about this on the podcast, is that Vince Dunn, LTIR. So we know he's out until November. And, we've talked about Vince Dunn and him partnering with Larson. And if it was a good pairing, yes, it's a good pairing. But if they're a good pair, but is it good to have that be the only place that Dunn/Larson can be successful? But now we have no choice. Larson is going to be with another defenseman because Vince Dunn out. Middle body injury. I don't think I've ever heard that, but that's why I like Disco Dan. He's always keeping us on our toes, Zaiem. But, when you think of just collectively what we've heard from Kraken camp regarding Vince Dunn, what is the update or the prognosis, if we have one, from what the team has been saying at practice and post game?
Well, so he is on long-term injured reserve. He cannot return to a game until November 12th. And so they have been, the pairings have been jumbled. Adam Larson is now paired with Riker Evans. So you still have a puck-moving defenseman paired with the stay-at-home defenseman. They're keeping Alexiak and Montour together. And then Josh Makura, who's now the next defenseman up, he's left with Wilborn as kind of the leftover line.
Mm-hmm.
It's concerning. The team without Vince Dunn has really struggled offensively. I looked at the numbers last year when he was injured late in the season in like March. And if they weren't playing the Sharks, the Ducks, or the Coyotes, they really could not score. Sometimes they couldn't score when they were playing the Sharks, Ducks, or Coyotes. But the only time really they generated any consistent offense was against the really, really bad teams. They just could not generate any offense without Vince Dunn. And now this year, you look at the Kraken's low scoring output. Vince Dunn has missed 3 games, and those were the 3 games that the Kraken have scored the fewest goals. That's concerning. Now, last year they didn't have Brandon Montour, and Riker Evans had not leveled up to where he is now, and so you would think that they, instead of having 0 puck moving defensemen, or maybe 0.5 puck moving defensemen, because Riker hadn't evolved yet. Now we have 2 fully evolved puck moving defensemen, but we're not really seeing the results on the ice yet. But overall, offense and defense, the Kraken were 25% less efficient when Vince Dunn was off the ice than on, in terms of, not like they had 55% goal share and then there was 35 without it. It was like, of their goal share advantage, that advantage dropped by 25%, which is still very meaningful.
Yeah.
So he's a very, very important player to this team, and it concerns me. And he misses games, and then the offense doesn't really work, and that concerns me. And that is the one thing that I go, is this going to be an issue? And is this something that's going to plague the Kraken throughout the season if Vince Dunn's health is an issue?
Yeah, I really appreciate you breaking down those numbers, because, it definitely puts things into context, because, we know Vince Dunn, generally speaking, he's liked by the fan base. He's fun, when he's tweeting things before we get the official news of Adam Larson. He's got so much love and appreciation for his D partner. And those are all fun things. But there have been times where, I've been critical of Vince Dunn, especially early on. But everything that you said, I think, is the promise that we saw in him. Why we talked about McCann, but he also has been extended, by the Seattle Kraken. That was the holdout last year. This most recent offseason, it was Beniers. Last year, it was Vince Dunn. But unfortunately, so not just this injury, which has him on LTIR, but he was hurt on the back end of last season, and that's where some of those stats that you were riddling off, they come from. So now it's, how does this Kraken team try to facilitate Dunn being as healthy as possible, so we can get back to the way that he's able to really jumpstart the offense with what he can do as a defenseman who can hop up in the play, get things, moving. Obviously special teams playing a role there as well. So, I think you're right. It's a big blow. I will say, given that Dan Bylsma has said he's going to be experimental, which what sounds like mostly the forward lines, I don't like the circumstances and the situation. But again, it goes back to what I said. How much do we want Vince Dunn to feel like he's only ever going to play with Adam Larson, and vice versa? Lars feeling that way about Dunn. So in some strange, warped way, I guess what I'm trying to say is this is an opportunity to also see that on the blue line. Now, this is not by choice. It is not by luxury. It is by necessity. And it goes back to the building blocks of what we both are deducing is Dan Bylsma's approach to have this team be nimble and go through some of the growing pains now, so that when they get to the playoffs, it's not something that they can't bounce back from. But I wanted to mention Vince Dunn, obviously, because that's big news. And that we know, at least for right now, that we're not going to have Dunn. We're no longer day to day. He's on LTIR. So, we know that. But it also is a way of introducing, again, that this is a Kraken team that has continued to find ways to tinker the forward lines. And so Zaiem, from the last game, which was against the Colorado Avalanche, to in preparation, which will be the next game against the Winnipeg Jets, seems like Dan Bylsma once again is mixing it up.
All the lines were in a blender today. You have Beniers, Everly McCann, Schwartz, Stevenson, Tanev was a line. You had Cartray with Shane Wright and Burakovsky. The D pairs did stay the same from last night. So you had Riker with Larson. I think probably they want to get the defensive pairs to have a little bit more time and chemistry together. One of the things that is interesting and allows some flexibility. So there is a silver lining to this Vince Dunn injury. So we get a small rebate, which is the Kraken had a 21 player roster. They didn't have the cap room for the full 23 players. So they were only carrying one extra player, one extra defenseman. That was Josh Mahura. They didn't have the space to call up anybody. Now with Vince Dunn on LTIR, they have some cap space. And so they can call up someone like Ryan Winterton or John Hayden from Coachella Valley. And I think that they'll probably keep things as is for now, unless somebody gets hurt in practice. But when they go on the road trip after this Saturday, you can expect one or two call-ups from Coachella Valley because they have the space. And then what does that do to your forward lines?
Right.
Are we blending even more? Because when Vince Dunn comes back, then they go back into that cap crunch where they don't have enough room for enough players. And if a single forward gets hurt, then they're down a forward for the entire game until they can do an emergency call. Right. So,
yeah.
I think these lines are just, let's see what happens. Offense generation, maybe not where they wanted it to be last night. And so let's see what works, what doesn't, and try to take pieces of it. But yeah, these lines they're crazy. I mean, they're just, they're all over the place.
Yeah, for sure. And again, we knew it was going to happen, but that doesn't always mean it's the most comfortable thing. But as we've both talked about, this is a homestand that's coming to a close. 2 more games, including on Thursday. And that is what Zaiem and I are going to talk about. But you have to wait till the next episode. Be kind to yourselves. Be kind to one another. Hold fast. Stay true. And loud and proud we say, let's go Kraken. Peace out, everybody.